Welcome back to The Explainer. We are jumping right into part 7 of our 10-part series on IPv4 and IPv6 transition technologies, drawn directly from the fantastic tutorial by Virtualization Options LLC, a Colorado-based tech research and advisory group. Now, if you are an infrastructure or security architect tasked with making your organization's IPv6 migration happen, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're skipping the foundational theory entirely. We are moving straight into the hard security controls and firewall designs you actually need for your transition infrastructure. Look, we have to face a pretty dangerous reality right off the bat. A service that is completely locked down and hardened against an IPv4 attack might be wide open and fully exposed on its IPv6 address. Assuming that your heavily fortified IPv4 defenses are just automatically going to cover your IPv6 traffic, that is a massive architectural failure. Honestly, it's the #1 trap security teams fall into. They spend months, literally months, perfecting their IPv4 posture, completely oblivious to the fact that an entirely separate, invisible backdoor is just resting wide open right next to it.
So here's our game plan for today to fix that. We're tackling 4 critical domains: the firewall parity gap, securing tunnels and translators, layer 2 network controls, and finally, active monitoring and detection. Let's get right to it.
Starting with Section 1, the firewall parity gap and securing the dual stack, we really need to analyze this because it's the most common, yet easily the most dangerous oversight in enterprise environments today. Think about the sheer contrast in how we usually build rule sets. Architects will spend hours meticulously crafting highly restricted ITables for IPv4, but then they completely fail to populate the IP6 tables, which is the exact equivalent for IPv6. Because these are 2 totally separate rule sets, this oversight leaves the IPv6 interface entirely exposed to attackers. Like we were saying earlier, it's literally like installing a massive heavy-duty vault door on the front of your building, but taking the back door completely off its hinges. And, this parity gap doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It gets compounded by 3 major issues. First, scanner blind spots. Your vulnerability scanners, they're probably only checking your IPv4 inventories, meaning that wide-open backdoor isn't even being watched. Second, you've got application socket bindings. Applications love to blindly bind to the ;, that's the IPv6 wildcard, meaning they automatically listen on both IPv4 and IPv6 without you telling them to. And finally, modern operating systems like Linux, Windows, macOS, they actually enable the IPv6 stack by default. So even if you never intentionally turned it on, it's probably active and completely unmonitored right now. So how do we fix it? We take these 4 immediate steps. Step 1, enforce absolute rule set parity. Literally, every single permit or deny rule you have on IPv4 needs an exact IPv6 equivalent. Step 2, point those security scanners directly at your IPv6 address inventories. Stop ignoring them. Step 3, audit those wildcard socket bindings we just talked about. And step 4, if IPv6 isn't operationally required on a specific host, just turn the stack off entirely. Do not leave it running in the background for no reason. Moving away from the host level and out to the network edge, we hit Section 2, securing tunnels and translators. Transition mechanisms out here introduce entirely new attack surfaces. Because tunnels bypass your traditional perimeter controls and translators break end-to-end integrity, you absolutely have to implement strict, specialized access policies. You might want to grab a screenshot of this block list because these actions are non-negotiable for hardening your perimeter. You have to actively block unauthorized Protocol 41 at all perimeters. Only permit traffic that is going to or from your explicitly documented tunnel brokers. Next, you need to completely drop Teredo on UDP port 3544. That means both inbound and outbound. It just shouldn't exist on a production network. And lastly, deny all 6-4 traffic, specifically that 2002:/16 prefix, right at your IPv6 perimeter. Now, for active translation mechanisms like SIIT or NAT64, you're facing another layer of perimeter defense. Whatever you do, never rely on the translator itself for inbound filtering. They are not designed to be security appliances. You have to mandate explicit, stateful firewalls deployed in line with your translators. And while you're at it, make sure you apply BCP38 ingress filtering at all edges feeding the translator so you can prevent source address spoofing. Okay. The perimeter is secured. Now we have to look inward. Inside your perimeter, the local link needs an immediate lockdown to stop rogue configurations, neighbor spoofing, and malicious network redirection. Let's look at Layer 2 network controls. To build these internal defenses, you need to knock out 4 critical Layer 2 steps. First up, deploy RA Guard on all your access switches. That restricts router advertisements strictly to authorized uplink ports. Second, enable DHCP v6 Guard so your servers can't be spoofed. Third, switch on dynamic ND inspection to validate neighbor advertisements against your snooping binding tables. And fourth, for your ultra-critical, high-security segments, seriously consider deploying Send. It gives you cryptographic authentication for these messaging protocols, which is huge. All right, we've locked down the host, the perimeter, and the local link. But look, architectural security means literally nothing if you don't have visibility. That brings us to our final section, active monitoring and detection. Your SIM, your Security Information and Event Management System, has to natively understand IPv6, IPFX, and NetFlow records. You need to set up your monitoring to trigger alerts immediately on a few specific events. Any unexpected Protocol 41 flows or UDP port 3544 Tirito traffic, treat that as an immediate incident. You also need to watch for RA floods, specifically high-rate ICMPv6 Type 134 events. Those strongly signal a denial of service attack, or maybe a rogue router popping up on your network. Finally, log an alert on any unusual extension header chains. Attackers love using weird extension headers to slip right past basic firewall rules. A big part of that active monitoring is strictly managing your state tables. For translation services, especially NAT64, you've got to track your state table utilization like a hawk. Set a hard alert the second your capacity hits 70%. Why 70? Because you need enough time to enable preemptive scaling to defend against state exhaustion attacks. If you wait until you're at 90 or 100%, well, your service is already failing and you're dropping legitimate traffic. And look, as an architect, you can't just guess at these controls. We don't wing it. I highly recommend grounding your firewall policies and your overall architectural designs in these specific ITF RFCs. For instance, RFC 4890 covers ICMPv6 filtering, 6105 is your blueprint for RA Guard, and 9099 dives deep into operational security considerations. By referencing these, you guarantee that you're actually meeting current, peer-reviewed operational security standards across your whole transition deployment. I want to leave you with one final, absolutely critical question to hash out with your security team this week. Are your current vulnerability scanners actually auditing those IPv6 wildcard bindings, or is your meticulously crafted perimeter already being silently bypassed? Seriously, don't just assume you know the answer, go verify it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on Chapter 7, and I can't wait to see you in the next phase of our architecture breakdown.